I'm Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. So glad to have you with us in this hour. To my mind, last week's national elections underscored that we are at a particular and peculiar inflection point in American history. In some ways, Election Day raised for me more questions than it provided answers. And I just don't mean who won what and who controls what. Some of that is still up in the air. That said, how do we narrow the gap between who we say we are as a nation and who we really are? What happens in a democracy when the gulf between soaring rhetoric and cynical policy is too wide to ignore any longer? What happens in a democracy when we discover that the history we teach our children is comprised of fables? Happens in a democracy when white supremacy is allowed to thrive? Hard questions which require, I think, heart answers. Carol Anderson, leading scholar and university professor at Emory, joins us in this hour to discuss how public policy is made and unmade, how racial inequality and racism affect that process and outcome, and to discuss the new documentary film from the mind of Carol Anderson. It's called I Too. Take a listen.
If you were surprised by the insurrection of January 6, 2021, then you haven't been paying attention.
There's a different reaction when we saw, blacks saw George Floyd on January 6th than whites did. We see January 6th, we're like, oh, okay, well, we've seen that before.
There was Hamburg. There was Wilmington, North Carolina. And there was Ocoee, Florida. They are all in a line that leads to this insurrection, this attack on American democracy. Were you taught the Hamburg Massacre in school?
No. You look across the river, all you could see is a jungle.
As African Americans, you got to go find it yourself. You got to go research it because you're going to miss it because they're not telling you.
And that's the original cross with the bullet holes.
So you have this church that is providing sanctuary and protection to those who are being chased out of their homes. Now that is biblical.
When it happened, he hit underneath a street car. And see, he could look underneath the car and see people hitting the street. Here they're sitting in this circle, and they would grab someone and they'd take them over a hill, and you'd hear a gunshot.
We have no idea how many black people were murdered. Some of these records were gone missing.
Wow, this is an incredible, horrific erasure of a history that must be told, that must be known.
Dr. Carol Anderson, always, and I do mean this sincerely, always a deep honor, a privilege to be in dialogue with you. Thank you for your time today. How have you been?
I've been hanging in there. How about you?
If I complained, I'd be an ingrate. I'm grateful for every day and delighted to once again, as I said, be in dialogue with you. A lot to cover in this hour. Let me start with this. Why should we not have been surprised by January the 6th?
Oh, because we as a nation have let white supremacy do enormous damage to democracy and have not had them face the consequences of doing that damage. And I will just go with the Civil War, where you have then Andrew Johnson providing amnesty to the white folks who attacked the United States of America and killed 600,000 American soldiers. And it's like, cool. Okay, welcome home. Mm-hmm. It is the way that you had to fight the Cold War. So every time the U.S. was opening its mouth about the lack of democracy behind the Iron Curtain, you had the Soviets going, Mississippi, South Carolina. And so the hypocrisy was just so stark that you had the State Department spending enormous amount of time trying to clean up the dirt instead of holding Mississippi and James O. Eastland accountable, instead of holding Strom Thurmond accountable. And so here again, when you're looking at January 6th, when you think about it, that big lie was about how black folks stole the election. So when Newt Gingrich says they stole the election in Atlanta, they stole the election in Milwaukee, they stole the election in Philadelphia, and when you inequities or fraud in Detroit, what they're saying are that these cities with sizable black populations stole the election from Donald Trump. And so when you think about it then, when you're seeing the Confederate flag being carried in the halls of Congress, it is, for me, it is a straight line from the Confederacy to January 6th.
To your point about Andrew Johnson offering amnesty to those who were involved in the attack on our nation, and where 600,000 people were killed, you raise the issue of accountability. Let me ask you whether or not in this moment, vis-a-vis January 6th, how you see the issue of accountability. I asked this question on the eve of Donald Trump. We discussed this earlier on today's program. I asked this question against the backdrop of Donald Trump preparing, we are told, to make a big announcement. We expect that big announcement will be that he's going to run for president once again. So since you invoked his name and that of Andrew Johnson, compare and contrast for me with regard to January 6th in our time. How do you see the issue or not of accountability?
We have not provided the full level of accountability that needs to happen for January 6th. The January 6th committee laid out the culpability of Donald Trump in plotting this coup, plotting this overthrow, in helping to foment it. And he spent 2021 and the first part of 2022 continuing to ply the big lie and continuing to foment discord and distrust, continuing to back election deniers to say that the election was stolen. He has to be held accountable. And so we need to see indictments coming down from the Department of Justice, and then we need to see a full, free, and fair trial and him being convicted for the damage that he has done. When white supremacy is not held accountable, bad things happen. And this is also part of what I laid out in that film, I Too, where you had the coup in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898 that overthrew what they called a fusion government of whites and blacks who had worked together. And white supremacists are like, we can't have that, and overthrew them. And the system, the political system was like, okay, yeah, we're cool with that. We know you overthrew a duly elected. What? Yes, it's Ocoee, Florida, where right after the 19th Amendment, the passage of the 19th Amendment, where women were supposed to have the right to vote, and the NAACP organized a massive voter registration drive. And the response was basically lynching, burning, looting, and ethnic cleansing in Ocoee, Florida.
A lot to talk about, as I said, in this hour. As we talk about this new documentary film, I Too, from the mind of Carol Anderson, leading scholar of African American studies, award-winning best-selling author and documentarian. And so we'll talk more with Professor Anderson when we move forward in this hour. It's worth noting that I'm looking at my phone now. I've been trying to follow a number of things while on the air live. So Mike Pence has a book out, I think, and he's been making the rounds of late. Just this morning on one of the morning shows, Mike Pence says, and I quote, that Trump's words on January 6th endangered me and my family and everyone at the Capitol. That's Mike Pence. That Trump's words on January 6th endangered me and my family and everyone at the Capitol. More about what Mike Pence had to say this morning, what he said in the last couple of days, as he's now talking about January 6th. It dovetails nicely with this documentary, I Too, from the mind of Carol Anderson, but a great deal more to talk about with regard to not just January 6th, but where we've come since then, or not as it were, and how this impacts the kind of public policy that we have. She is a brilliant public intellectual, so again, a great deal to get to as we move through this hour with Dr. Carol Anderson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Did you know, in a recent study, nearly 1 in 3 Black Californians report poor treatment in the healthcare system because of their race or ethnicity. Results from the Listening to Black Californians research study show the obstacles many of us face in getting quality healthcare. Join us as we talk with the study's lead researcher, Shakari Byerly, and California Healthcare Foundation Senior Program Officer, Catherine Haynes. Tune in Tuesday, November 15th at 8 a.m. to First Things First to learn more about the results and how to take action.
Health is Wealth and Medicare and Covered California's open enrollment for medical insurance is here. RHJ Insurance Agency can help you find a right for you and your family. Call 562-204-6120 for your free quote. Don't leave your health to chance. Open enrollment is here and affordable coverage is just a phone call away. Call 562-204-6120 for your free quote and get the coverage you need. Go to www.rhjins.com.
So you tested positive for COVID. What's next? Treat yourself. There are free COVID treatments available. Taken by pill, these medications can stop the illness from getting serious. So treat yourself. Call a healthcare provider or the statewide COVID hotline at 833-422-4255 to find free treatment today. Again, that's 833-422-4255. Brought to you by the California Department of Public Health.
IRS. 3 letters that strike fear into everyone, and for a good reason. The IRS is the most powerful collection agency on earth, and being in debt to the IRS can have serious consequences. Oftentimes, it begins with the IRS sending you a collection letter and then escalates. And before you know it, they're garnishing your paychecks, seizing your bank accounts, even your home or business could be at risk. But thankfully, there's Optima Tax Relief, America's #1 most trusted tax relief firm. They've resolved over $1 billion in tax debt for their clients. Business Bureau. Their tax professionals have the expertise and experience to help you put your tax debt to rest. Call now and get your free consultation today.
Call 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis Smiley. She is Dr. Carol Anderson, leading scholar of African American Studies at Emory University, and the mind behind the new documentary film called I Too. We were talking a moment ago about January 6th, and we'll continue talking about that in a second, because it's at the heart of this documentary. But I mentioned that Mike Pence has been making the rounds, has a new book that comes out tomorrow, I believe. The book is called So Help Me God. The book releases tomorrow. It's called So Help Me God. Let me just read a few paragraphs of one of the stories that we are following here with regard to what Pence is saying as he makes these rounds. Former Vice President Mike Pence said in an exclusive interview with ABC News' David Muir that former President Donald Trump's rhetoric was reckless as a mob of his supporters ransacked the Capitol last year, with Pence and others temporarily forced into hiding. I mean, the president's words were reckless. It was clear he decided to be a part of the problem, Mike Pence told David Muir. Pence said he was angered over a tweet from Trump as the insurrection unfolded, and when the former president said he didn't have the courage to do what should have been done after he rebuffed the pressure to not only certify President Joe Biden's 2020 victory. I'm quoting now again from Mike Pence. I turned to my daughter who was standing nearby and I said, it doesn't take courage to break the law. It takes courage to uphold the law. So just some of the things that Mike Pence has said in this exclusive interview with David Muir of ABC News. When you hear Mike Pence all these months later making these kinds of comments, his strongest comments to date about what he thought of Donald Trump in that particular moment, Dr. Anderson, how do you process that?
I wish he would have said it in testimony under oath before the January 6th committee. That's when it needed to be said, or it needed to be said right after on January 7th. It needed to be said on January 8th. It needed to be said on January 9th. So all of these folks, including Mike Pence, who hold the truth until they can publish a book and make the rounds and get book sales off of it, while American democracy is hanging under Damocles' sword, is just, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. He knew he was in danger. He knew that Trump's tweet was part of the problem, was a major part of the problem. But he looks like he's giving pure, loyalty to Trump over all of this time, when his family and American democracy were hanging in the balance, when 140 cops were in, when they built the gallows for Mike Pence, going, "Where's Mike? Where's Mike?" Right? Or when they're hunting Nancy Pelosi. Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy? So all of this concern about the attack is like a day late and a dollar short.
Yeah. So Mike Pence, with this book coming out tomorrow, So Help Me God, and making the rounds of media interviews, puts this January 6th story back front and center for the American public to consider what did happen and what ought to happen as we move forward. You said earlier in this conversation, Dr. Anderson, that we should not have been surprised by January 6th, and yet most of us did not see it coming. Help me square those two things, that we should not have been surprised on the one hand, and yet we didn't see it coming.
I think part of it is that so many Americans are hooked on what I call the drug of American exceptionalism, where it's that sense of, that stuff happens over there, but that could never happen here. That could never happen here. Well, it has already happened here. I mean, that's part of what we have to understand. That's why we have to know our history. And that is why you have this massive backlash among so many of these states about teaching our real history. Wilmington, North Carolina was a successful coup. There was a duly elected government, that believed in the power of public education, that believed that folks had the right to vote, and so had dismantled the poll tax and the literacy test, those barriers that the other southern states were putting up. And the white supremacists looked up and said, "Oh, you got to go." And they slaughtered black folks, and then held the other elected officials hostage, basically saying, "You're going to resign or you're going to die." And so we have seen this before. And when you begin to think about the violence that had been churning in Trump's regime, from his rallies in 2016, where he was encouraging his followers to beat up people who disagreed with him. Go ahead, hit him hard. I'll pay your legal fees. Right? When you think about Charlottesville, there were good people on both sides. For the folks who were hollering, "Jews will not replace us," and who ran over a protester, Heather Heyer, violence being nurtured. Or when he's during the debate in 2020, where Mike Wallace, I believe it was saying, "Will you denounce white supremacists?"
Yeah, Chris Wallace. Chris Wallace. Sorry, yes.
No, I got you. And he's like, "Thank you." And he's like, "Well, who do you mean?" He's like the Proud Boys. He's like, "What do you mean?" Like the Proud Boys. And he's like, "Okay, stand back and stand by." That's a denunciation? No, that was a call to arms. And so we're seeing all of these massive breadcrumbs on a call to arms. And so you saw how they tried to deploy the legal system with over 60 challenges. You saw how they then tried the subterfuge of these fake electors to create the kind of confusion about who won the Electoral College. And when that didn't work, violence was the next thing, and the messages were the FBI and the Capitol Police and the Secret Service were all getting these messages coming through about, okay, we're going to take the Capitol. The only way we're going to be able to get our president is through the gun. So this is happening, but American exceptionalism says, oh, that can't happen here. Yeah. No. That's not who we are.
Speaking of who we are, I want to come to that in just a second because there's a conversation we could have for. You could teach a seminar on this question of who we say we are. We'll come to that in a second here. But before I move too quickly, though, I thought I heard you chuckle in my headphones. I thought I heard you chuckle when I said the name of his book is "So Help Me God." Did I detect a chuckle on your part?
You most definitely did.
And what's behind that chuckle?
Oh, that is the folks who wrap themselves in God and do the most horrific things in the name of God is just like, spare me, spare me. So that's what that was. It was his God should have told him to stand up to Donald Trump early. Instead, remember, he had the plane being held there in Indiana so he could hop on to Trump's plane to plead to become the vice president. So he knew he was making a deal basically with a man who was absolutely unethical, with no integrity, who had a sordid, nasty history of sexual violence, of grifting, of being a fraud, a con artist, all of that. But he wanted it so badly, he betrayed himself. So help me God. Right.
I get it. So now we're both chuckling. Okay. let me move from that. So you teed up what I really want to get to in this hour. And I am so delighted that you did this documentary. I too will talk more about that before we close, of course, at the top of the hour. So we got more time to delve into this. But a moment ago, you used this phrase, "who we are," and I mentioned earlier on the show today that I was honored this morning to give a lecture via Zoom. Obviously, I'm sitting in my studio in Los Angeles, where this station is flagship. But I gave a guest lecture to students at Vanderbilt this morning over Zoom before I came on the air. Did an hour of that, and now 3 hours on the air. But this came up in our talk with these students at Vanderbilt this morning, and it is this notion that I suggested to them that we have to wrestle with, which is, who are we really? Not who we say we are, but who are we really? And I said to the students this morning, I'm not talking about the ideals, the ideals that we profess. I'm talking about these crazy ideas around which we seem to wrap our brains these days, and we see people advancing in strange and bizarre situations. So it's really a fundamental question of who we are really. I said to these students, America has grown older, but we've not grown wiser. We've grown older, but we've not grown up. We haven't addressed the question yet of who we are really. And so no better person to put that question to than you right now about how we go about narrowing the gap between who we say we are as a nation and who we really are. Dr. Anderson.
And that is where we have got to push back on all of this mess coming through these state legislatures banning the teaching of real American history. What we have on one side is what I call the Rick Santorum School of History. And Rick Santorum said, Europeans came to this empty land and we built this. Lord have mercy. One, the land was not empty. Two, there were so many folks who built this. But what that narrative does, what that whitewash flattened history does, is it creates policies that say who are the real Americans, who are deserving of the resources of this nation, who are the makers and who are the takers. And we get that kind of juxtaposition happening consistently in public policy based on really flawed, bad history. When we and I really truly believe that the awakening that happened in the wake of George Floyd, where you had a 50-state protest movement, 50 states, so folks were protesting in Utah. scared, and I'm going to use the scholarly term, bejeebers out of these folk who were like, whoa, they realize how precarious, how racialized, how racially discriminatory, how many isms we have in American history, that America was not fully born like Athena out of Zeus's head, perfect. But that there is so much that has to be done, and they're willing to fight for it. So I remember the young white woman in the protest, the Black Lives Matter protest in D.C., where the cops are coming at this young black man, and she put her body in between the cops and this young black man. That had to be that whoa moment where they're like, how does she know to do that? How does she understand issues of oppression and systemic racism? We have got to reteach our students so that they don't know that history. And so that's why you're seeing this massive push to erase the history of slavery, erase the history of Jim Crow.
Let me come right back to that scene when we continue our conversation on KBLA Talk 1580 after news, traffic, and sports with Dr. Carol Anderson.
Courage is contagious. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Moderna says its updated COVID booster is effective against Omicron subvariants BA.4 and BA.5. Those once made up the majority of cases weeks ago, but now the CDC says they account for about a third of all reported cases. The data hasn't yet been published in a medical journal or been peer-reviewed. COVID-19 cases have been rising since mid-October, since winter has set in all around the country. African-American singer Lizzo will be getting some special recognition at the 2022 People's Choice Awards this December. NBC announced Lizzo will receive the People's Champion Award for her commitment to breaking barriers and empowering others to use their own voices to create change. The three-time Grammy winner has been nominated for the award 5 times for her music and activism. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, INnews.com.
Slow and go as you travel downtown. We're still seeing a top in Rosemead. And it looks like West Covina. We've got this west onto the shoulder now. 10 west as you get towards Citrus. That has made it to the right side. Rosemead, it's going to be 2 of the right lanes blocked with this stalled vehicle. 10 west at Rosemead Boulevard. That's a broken down big rig. You are slow from that 605. The 10 west into downtown at San Pedro Street is where we do have a collision on the right shoulder. Skip to that 5101 interchange. It's going to be a busy drive. Seen a hazard in West LA. Watch out for the ladder on the 10 east approaching that 405. The ladder in the left lane, and then on the 10 east as you get towards Lincoln, Santa Monica, some kind of debris in the right lane there.
The holiday season is here, and if peace and quiet is at the top of your wish list, you'll love Casper's selection of mattresses. Save up to $800 online or at a participating store near you. Exclusions apply. See Casper.com/promo.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Rams are now in last place in the NFC West after yesterday's home loss to Arizona. They also lost wide receiver Cooper Kupp in the fourth quarter with a serious ankle injury. Kupp is expected to miss a few games. The Chargers were scoreless in the second half last night at San Francisco. The lack of offense helped the 49ers hold on for a 6-point win. The Lakers snapped a 5-game losing streak. Anthony Davis had 37 points. Lakers beat Brooklyn by 13. USC is the only Pac-12 school in the top 10 of this week's AP college football rankings. The Trojans are 7th. Undefeated Jackson State, now 10-0, remains at number 5 in this week's Division I AA poll. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by MVP Accident Attorneys. When it comes to your settlement, we're slam dunk. Call 833-MVP-WINS or check their website at MVP.com for a free case review.
When you're the victim of a car accident, hiring the right law firm can be the difference between a rewarding settlement and striking out. Call the pros at MVP Accident Attorneys at 833-MVP-WINS for your free consultation.
Call me your MVP.
Life is uncertain. It's okay to feel stressed, anxious, worried, or frustrated. It's normal. With CalHope's free and secure mental health resources, it's easy to get the help you and your loved ones need when you need it the most. Call our warm line at 833-317-4673 or live chat at calhope.org today.
If you have certain chronic conditions,
asthma,
diabetes, and you're 19 years of age or older,
52, 36,
42, you may be at increased risk for pneumococcal pneumonia. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20, pneumococcal 20-valent conjugate vaccine, a Pfizer vaccine that can help protect against pneumococcal pneumonia in just one dose. Prevnar 20 is approved for adults to help prevent infections from 20 strains of the bacteria that cause pneumococcal pneumonia. Continued approval may depend on a supportive study. Don't get Prevnar 20 if you've had a severe allergic reaction to the vaccine or its ingredients. Adults with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. The most commonly reported side effect was pain at the injection site. For additional common side effects and full prescribing information, please call 1-855-213-2138 or visit Prevnar20.com.
I'm going to ask my doctor about getting vaccinated.
With Prevnar 20.
King C. Gillette is the modern man's answer to their facial hair. A complete set of precision tools and quality care products fit for your beard style. There's the King C. Gillette Beard Thickener that strengthens the facial hair you already have while increasing the volume of each strand for a noticeably thicker look. And with daily use, it maintains thickness with a lightweight fragrance with the Master your style with King C. Gillette.
We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
Our guest is Dr. Carol Anderson, leading scholar at Emory University, award-winning best-selling author, now documentarian with a new film called I Too, and just all-around brilliant sister who I enjoy talking to, have enjoyed talking to over the course of my career, and delighted to welcome her for the first time, but not the last time, to the airways of KBLA Talk 1580, flagship here in the city of Los Angeles, Leimert Park, to be exact. Before that news, traffic, and sports break, she was talking, I should say, about what happens in a democracy when we discover that the history we're teaching our children is really comprised of fables and not facts, and why we're seeing this effort in this moment to erase a history that ought to be taught. Why it is that we are wrestling with this notion that some are pushing against to teach the truth in our classrooms. Dr. Anderson, continue your point. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's we were basically laying out that when you are able then to have a large swath of your citizens believe the myth, what I call like the Rick Santorum myth, that Europeans came to an empty land and built it all by themselves, then it allows then for policies to look like they have a foundation. It allows the Supreme Court to talk about originalism and make that originalism appear to be a valid legal theoretical principle, instead of saying that America is an aspirational nation. The problem is, we hold these truths to be self-evident. The problem is we've got too many folk who want to treat that aspiration as if it's an achievement, as if we're already there. And that is where that's not who we are comes from, because it deals with achievement and not as an aspiration that we have to work toward and work for and then sustain.
What do you make, since you went there, let me follow you as I like to do anyway. What do you make of the fact that so many people are yet holding on to this notion of American exceptionalism when the data is incontrovertible? In so many ways, the evidence is abundantly clear that we ain't all that we think we are, ain't all that we used to be, and may not remain where we are if we don't make some fundamental changes. But what do you make of that juxtaposition, that there are still people holding on to this notion of American exceptionalism where day in and day out we see data that suggests otherwise?
And I think it is, I've heard the new term called hopium, Hopium, and that is the kind of, I'm going to call it like a patriotic drug, where we're so doped up on this patriotism that it means that we don't see reality. And because we don't see reality, then we don't deal with the fact that we've got such staggering high maternal and infant mortality rates. We don't deal with the fact that we have difficulty in being able to meet the educational needs of a high-tech, knowledge-based economy. We have difficulty in keeping our infrastructure together. We have gun violence, gun deaths that are off the chart because we're swaddled in this American exceptionalism with happening and then being able to deal with the data, deal with the facts.
Dr. King, you were talking, I thought about King as I often do, of course. But King talked about, King warned us, as you recall, against taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism, as he called it. The tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Here comes Dr. Carol Anderson warning us against taking the tranquilizing drug of hopium. That's the phrase of the day. Be careful about taking that tranquilizing drug called hopium. I love it, and I'm so glad you introduced that word to my lexicon. I'm going to run with that one for the next few days. You better believe. I love it, hopium. That's what you get when you talk to brilliant minds like Carol Anderson. So one of the other big questions that I teased at the top of this conversation was what you have to say, and I want to hear it now about what happens in a democracy when there is a gulf between the soaring rhetoric that we get and the cynical policy, a gulf that is so wide that it can no longer be ignored. Talk to me.
And what we see then is that we have a wide swath of our population that is disengaged. But that is via public policy. The voter suppression laws were designed to disengage American citizens. To make it look like it doesn't matter, this thing is so corrupt, it doesn't matter if I vote or not. They're going to do what they're going to do anyway. And besides, we've got all of these barriers. It doesn't matter. So when you think about it, we had the highest voter turnout in 2020. But we had more people, as I understand it, who did not vote than who did vote. That's staggering. You cannot survive as a democracy with that kind of alien policy, induced alienation. We also have to engage, what does it mean when we have all of these promises about criminal justice reform, about voting rights, about the environment, about equitable housing, about student loan debt cancellation. And what we get then is gridlock, or we get cutting off at the edges. We don't meet the challenge of the moment. It is by design, and it sounds really weird, but what it requires then is to overcome that sense of disengagement. And I think of Paul Weyrich. Paul Weyrich was the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation. And he gave a talk before a group of Christians. And he said, you're all, and this is in 1980, you're all cuckoos. You all believe in this good government because you want everybody to vote. And then he said, well, I don't want everybody to vote. Because quite candidly, our leverage goes up as the voting populace goes down. So when you have as the framework of the Heritage Foundation, one of the key supporters of the right wing, then you've got this sense that we don't want everybody to vote. How do we make that happen? How do we create disengagement? How do we create a sense of futility? And it requires, it requires us to push back and basically vote in mass for folks who get it.
You mentioned a moment ago the challenge to meet the moment, the challenge of meeting this particular moment, which leads me to ask, again, since we referenced King earlier in this conversation, to your mind, Dr. Anderson, what do you see as the urgency of now? Everybody loves to quote King on that line, the urgency of now. What do you see as the urgency of now?
The fierce urgency of now.
Exactly.
is that we have a party that does not believe in democracy at all. At all. They don't believe in the rule of law. They don't believe in evidence. They don't believe in truth. They just believe in pure, raw power and creating harm to key constituencies. Generate grievance as a way to remain in power. And so when you have two major parties and one doesn't believe in democracy, that's a problem. That is a major problem for democracy, because democracy is about governing. And so I think of it in terms of when the air is bad, or when you have a really bad cold and you can't breathe, all you can think about is your next breath. That's where you're focused. But when the air is fine and you're fine, you're able to think about what you're going to do next, how you're going to live your life, what are your dreams, where are you going, what are you going to do. Good governance is like good, clean air and a healthy body. It allows it's the people who live there to be able to dream, to be able to execute their vision. When you have all you can think about is, where can I get my next breath?
Yeah. You mentioned power a moment ago. When we come forward, I want to come back to this notion of power. Public Enemy, P.E., famously said, "Fight the power, fight the power." I want to ask you about the fight for power and how Carol Anderson frames the fight for power that we are in right now. Back to this lecture that I gave this morning to the students at Vanderbilt. We were talking about the race in Georgia, and I was making the point that they've taken the good white folk in Georgia have taken where Dr. Anderson teaches and resides at Emory University in Atlanta. The good white folk in Georgia have decided that by any means necessary, sorry Malcolm, they want the power, and they will vote for a person who is borderline illiterate, who is inarticulate, who is unprepared. You can do this all day long, right? All kind of words to describe the candidacy of one Herschel Walker, and yet this race is still so close. And I love Raphael Warnock, but he ain't no radical progressive. I mean, the brother is a Baptist preacher. He's at best a moderate, and even the evangelical. And think about this: the evangelicals in Georgia don't want to support the guy who pastors the church once pastored by Dr. King. That shows you how bad things are, that evangelicals are not for a Baptist preacher in the state of Georgia. And so they've decided that more than anything else, they want power. They'd elect Daffy Duck to the U.S. Senate if Daffy Duck did what they told him to do. So it's not about Herschel Walker, it's about the power. I want to ask Dr. Anderson how she sees not the fight for power movement that we've been in for so many years, decades for that matter, but the fight for power in this moment in late modernity. Dr. Carol Anderson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
It's the holiday season. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News. Some things to look forward to this holiday season. Whitney fans, Whitney Houston's estate to release fragrance in her honor, reportedly marking one of the first official endorsement deals for the late singer. Available through the Home Shopping Network, Scent Beauty, and even Walmart by mid-November. And fans are also thrilled to see the Best Man franchise back on screen, this time as a limited series debuting in December on Peacock. I just love the holidays. What are you most excited about this season? Tweet us to let us know at KBLA 1580, #KBlackMinuteHoliday.
Sparkly and shiny and bold and bright. And this holiday season, Ulta Beauty has even you. Because our kind of holiday is you having your kind of holiday with incredible must-haves like the Dyson hairdryer and a new limited edition blue, shimmery palettes from Morphe and Tarte, plus fragrances from Ariana Grande and more. So revel in that holiday bliss. Head to your local Ulta Beauty or buy online and pick up in store. Ulta Beauty. The possibilities are beautiful.
When you're the victim of a car accident, hiring the right law firm can be the difference between a rewarding settlement and striking out. Call the pros at MVP Accident Attorneys at 833-MVP-WINS for your free consultation.
Call me your MVP.
IRS. Three letters that strike fear into everyone, and for a good reason. The IRS is the most powerful collection agency on earth, and being in debt to the IRS can have serious consequences. Oftentimes, it begins with the IRS sending you a collection letter and then escalates. And before you know it, they're garnishing your paychecks, seizing your bank accounts, even your home or business could be at risk. But thankfully, there's Optima Tax Relief, America's #1 most trusted tax relief firm. They've resolved over $1 billion in tax debt for their clients. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. Their tax professionals have the expertise and experience to help you put your tax debt to a free consultation today.
Call 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
We're not ratings driven. We're engagement driven. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
Dr. Carol Anderson, you teach this stuff every day. You've written about it in a number of best-selling texts, so you know this stuff better than I do. How then, in this present moment, do you frame the fight for power that we are in? Frederick Douglass says, you would know, put it this way, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. So frame for me the fight for power that we are in this present moment.
And what we're seeing is a clash between two separate visions. Mm-hmm. One vision is for a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious democracy, one that is vibrant and inclusive, one that recognizes that we have enough resources for every doggone buddy here. Then the other vision, and that's the one where they have put up Herschel Walker as the front man, is what we call a Herrenvolk democracy. Think about apartheid South Africa, where you have a vast rightless labor pool. And then you have a small strata of whites at the top who gain all of the resources from that rightless labor pool. And you have another strata of whites who believe that because they are white, they are also going to be able to gain access to those vast numbers of resources. So a Herrenvolk democracy versus a multiracial, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy. That's what the fight for power is about right now.
I receive it. The last question that I teed up at the very top of the hour that I wanted you to unpack for us, and you've done such a brilliant job on all the others, was simply this, or is simply this: what happens in a democracy when white supremacy is allowed to thrive? Now, the answer to that question we already know because we're witnessing it in real time, right? In real time, we see what happens to a democracy when white supremacy is allowed to thrive. In our remaining moments, in just a moment, I want to ask Dr. Anderson a question that I want to tweak a bit. So again, we see what happens in real time. The question is, what happens long term? You heard her describe the fight for power that we are in now and what the fight is about, these two different visions of America. What happens if in this present moment we do not do our part to stamp out white supremacy as best we can? It's like terrorism. I don't think you can never do away. You can kill a terrorist, I-S-T. You can't do away with the ism per se. But I'm curious as to her take on what happens if in this moment we do not push back aggressively against white supremacy and it's allowed to continue to thrive even beyond the moment that we find ourselves in. That's our exit question for Dr. Carol Anderson when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at J.P. Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. And I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
I find it important to be here as a business owner and entrepreneur because I want some more capital, and I'm not really a fan of loans. So it's really interesting to see how people have gained wealth and what different spaces to advance my money in, whether it be stocks, digital.
And why do you think it's important for companies like Chase to promote building generational wealth in Black and brown communities?
I mean, it's important to me as one of the biggest banks in the world to promote Black wealth, because most banks don't really, in my opinion, care about the money that I'm spending as they would, opposed to a white counterpart that might have the same dollar amount in their accounts.
Well, you can bet on Chase offering insights on financial health, the path to home ownership, and entrepreneurship. It's the Chase Advancing Black Wealth Tour.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminding you that when we fight, we win. Community Coalition trains activists and organizers in order to support power building with Black, brown, indigenous, and people of color. Community Coalition works to help transform the social and economic conditions in South LA that foster addiction, crime, violence, and poverty by building a community institution that involves thousands in creating, influencing, and changing public policy. Founded by Karen Bass in 1990, Community Coalition was born as an African American and Latino organization with the goal of turning hopelessness and despair into action. The activism of the Community Coalition's members and community residents has almost solely stimulated economic recovery in South LA for decades, generating billions of dollars by redirecting them to South LA schools and foster care. In addition, Community Coalition offers amazing mind, body, soul resources, advocacy, and policy work, and has a robust and active membership body. To become a member, get a referral, or get support for your nonprofit, visit cocosouthla.org or call 323-750-9087. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Where can you light up the tree and the savings? Lowe's, actually. Find deals on endless festive holiday decor, like 20% off all pre-lit artificial trees and endless gifts found only at Lowe's. Like the new Cobalt 257-piece mechanics tool set for $99, valued over $600 if purchased separately. Check back daily for deals during Black Friday month and start saving now at Lowe's. Home to any possibility. Offer valid through 11/16. While supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Got about 4 minutes left in conversation with our guest in this hour, all-star professor at Emory University, Dr. Carol Anderson. So, Dr. Anderson, your take on what happens if in this present moment we do not effectively wrestle and wrangle with this notion of white supremacy. Can the democracy survive, and if so, how much longer?
No, it will look like it looked in Jim Crow when we did not effectively wrestle with and drive a stake through the heart of the Confederacy, where we had a Supreme Court that dismantled the Bill of Rights, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment that were there to provide the structure of support and citizenship to African Americans. And they also went after the Force Act and the Enforcement Act. And we ended up with states that had like zero African Americans registered to vote in major counties. At turnout rates in 1942, because of massive disfranchisement, of only 7%. And having these kinds of laws in place basically skewered democracy, because you had people then going up to Congress drafting laws that were as anti-black as they could possibly be. That's what happens when we don't hold white supremacy accountable. That's what's at stake. Because as they see this diversifying America, it is scaring the crap out of them. This is why you hear the stuff about the great replacement theory. This is about how do we recreate the America of pre-Brown, the America of the 1920s, of the early 1950s. That's their vision. If we don't push back, that's what the vision is.
I've asked this question of others. I've not had a chance lately to ask it of you. Let me ask this as our exit question for real. In the 90 seconds I have left, how fragile, to your mind, is our democracy? Are we a nation on the brink of collapse?
My faith has always been in the people. Mm-hmm. And we saw that in this last election where we had Gen Z turn out in droves, where we had African Americans turning out like nobody's business. That faith in the people, the vast majority of people want democracy. We let the people do what needs to be done, and this democracy can survive and it can thrive. It requires that we hold politicians accountable for their mess, for their anti-democratic, anti-blackness policy.
30 seconds, how are you personally sustaining your hope?
By talking with you and talking with other folks who really want this thing to work, and who know that we can make it work. That part of what we're seeing is white supremacy got hit with one of those like George Foreman uppercuts. And they're reeling, right? They're like, whoa, what is this? What is this? What do you mean we're not popular? What? And so we got to hit them again and hit them again and hit them again.
As I said, she's an all-star professor at Emory. I love her dearly. Her mind is as sharp as any in this country, and she is one of the best that our people have ever produced. Always delighted to be in conversation with Dr. Carol Anderson. Thank you for your time. We'll do it again, sister. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Hour 3, final hour already, believe it or not, of Tavis Smiley. When we come forward after news, traffic, and sports, you're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.